G'day, fans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Good Old DNA Reviews, the last one for good old 2022, Mr. Aaron. What do you think about all that? We've finally got to December. Christmas is in a couple of days' time, and here
I
we are
know.
reviewing what happened over the past 12 months.
Who would have thought at the beginning of the year when we looked at the overcrowded market of online review programs and said, yes, we're going to add another one, that it would lead all the way through to a end of year special.
It's very, very exciting. We've got people joining us already, which is particularly cool. We at least thought, we kind of did actually have to discuss about all the things that have came out throughout the year. There's probably going to be things that people have long since forgotten about, because you've got to remember something that comes out on like January the 15th. That was like 11 months ago. So
And there's
I
going
don't
to
know
be
what
other
came out on
things
January
that,
the 15th, but you never know. Sorry, what was that, dude?
other things that people have been trying to deliberately block out of their mind. Legend of the Sea Devils.
Indeedy, doody, dotty. Guys already mentioned happy birthday, Aaron. Yes, it's Aaron's birthday today. He's grown another ring around the trunk. So if we saw him in half, we can count all those, which would be very, very exciting. And of
I've
course,
got more freaking rings than the Hamburglar.
oh, there you go. There's always room for one more. It's like a collectible. There's always room for one more. And as a gift, you just got to go to your own store and just find something you like and go, you know what? I'm going to give myself that $20,000 yak face steel mint in box collectible. Yay, team. It is for me. Is that right?
Or give myself a gift voucher. That's the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh, I tell you what, very, very cool. I like this one from the Vial. Not these guys again. Yeah, no, we're back again after a couple of weeks of sort of like missing a show here or there, or just not being on at all. But we are back. So even Christy said happy birthday. Everybody's like wishing you well, which is particularly cool. So well done. You don't look a day over 21, dude.
21 stone. Thanks a lot.
There you go. Well, what can I say? The wait, boom, tish, was worth it. So for those who are interested, of course, we'll discuss Aaron's store later on. It is open Christmas Eve, which is this Saturday. Make sure you're coming down for those last minute gift ideas. Aaron will be there. I will be there. Yay, team. Party, party, party. You can never have enough nerdy talk before the big fat red dude. Big fat. Oh, it's a big... makes his so it starts climbing down your chimney, if you know what I mean. What do you reckon?
And the best thing, for those who don't know, we actually had our maybe the first of annual dinner catch up with the Sci-Fi Zone family, and not a single person have gone, you've given me bloody COVID. So it looks like it was a successful evening, doesn't it?
Absolutely fantastic. Joe said he came to here to nerd with me. Who's his Aaron dude? I don't know. He's just sort of decided to stick his beak in on the action after a couple of weeks absence, but it's all very, very good. Now, tonight, of course, is our review show. And the funny thing is that Christy, who's one of our regular viewers, is here with us at the moment, kept sort of dropping hints that she wanted us to review the series Willow, which just came out only about a few weeks ago. And at the dinner, funny enough, we actually asked her, what do you think of Willow? And, of course, the moment a person pauses and goes, it's never a good thing. So maybe in hindsight, it was a good thing that we didn't review Willow, because apparently it's not much chop. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I've watched it. It's just okay. It might, you never know. It's halfway through. It might get better as it goes along, but it isn't one I would like to dissect and analyze every single week either. Maybe you can think about your yawns for the series so far, Christy.
Indeed. I've got a new person joining us, Rebecca, saying happy birthday. So I don't know who Rebecca is, but thank you for joining the show. Hope you enjoy what we've got to talk about, because it's a very, very exciting. Now, just to cover off, especially for Rebecca, who's a first-time viewer, we have been reviewing shows and that throughout the entire year. And if you are keen to suffer through some of our reviews, you can go to the Sci-Fi Zone website, which is written at the bottom. Don't forget the hyphen between the site and the fi, and you can click on the whole bunch of links that are there. And feel free to watch us gurgle on about stuff, because we gurgle in great detail. And as has been the ultimate joke, that our episodes run longer than the shows we're reviewing, which is kind of interesting.
Bit of a worry. Yeah, it's a bit of a worry, isn't it? And yep, for better or for worse, all our reviews are saved on the page for prosperity.
Indeedy doody dotty. Yeah, I like that. Willow is 5 yawns so far. That's 5 out of 10. So always got room for the Christy yawns. What can I say? Rebecca, Christy's sister. Yep, excellent, fantastic. So we're talking about the Sci-Fi U in a review, and of course we're talking about mainly movies and TV shows, which is particularly cool. And as always, there is spoiler alerts for those who haven't seen half the stuff that's come out. So if you are worried about what we're going to be talking about, then block your ears, as they say. Now, this is a generalized show. We're not going through things in massive detail, but we are going to be covering off our top fives as well. We're going to be breaking this up, so we're not just going to chuck them all in one go. So you're going to have to sort of suffer through us throughout the episode. But to kick things off, staying away from the big franchises, regarding some movies, Mr. Aron. Now, you've seen far more movies this year than I have. So, in summary, old son, what's sort of got your attention on some of them?
Oh, it's been an interesting year because what we've seen is this year is the knock-on year from lockdown. So you could say a lot of conventional movies have come out because they had to find different ways the previous year to film the movies, or movies that have come out this year have been held over from lockdown because they didn't want them to be released in the cinema when there was no audience. So we've had a really weird, diverse year of movies. And I can't say there's any super amazing standouts like there are in other years, but it's been just an interesting way to see the way society has dealt with lockdown and the fallout for that this year. And where we've said it's a sci-fi review of movies, I'd say it's more of a genre review because I've chosen some that aren't exactly sci-fi to look at. What have you thought of the movies this year, Dags?
Well, there's a lot that I haven't seen, and I think it's very interesting because a lot of, and I agree, the COVID thing didn't help at all. And most years, like last week, we did a review of all these different years from 2000 to 2020, and there was always something in there. You go, oh, that was an awesome year. There's some really good stuff that came out. 2022, I don't know. I mean, there's a few things that have popped up that people are raving about that I haven't seen. I guess. Two of the main ones, I guess, is the film Nope, which I didn't see, but I know you did, which I think Nope stands for Not of Planet Earth. A lot of people were raving about the Prey movie, which was the new version of Predator, which was set like 300 years ago. And I don't know, didn't see Lightyear, which is the Buzz Lightyear thing. I seemed to be a great idea. And of course, there was another Jurassic Park movie amongst others. So just regarding the independents, so there's nothing that stood out for you going, oh, that is an absolute ripper.
It is interesting because Prey came out and I thought that was a really great movie. And what it did, it's inspired me to go back through the Predator backpack catalogue and watch some of the older ones. And I go, you know what? The older ones are a lot better. A lot better. So especially when you can compare them straight away on streaming services now, it recommends other movies and you see it. And Nope was another one where I saw it at the cinema. It was a good movie. It wasn't great. It wasn't horrible. It's one of those sort of... Nope almost sort of describes a good way to describe it. It's not like a nope, it's Nope, you know. It reminded me of a lot of different genres and they've put a twist on it, but it was more of a good episode of The Twilight Zone than a fantastic big screen movie from my point of view.
Very good. And the other big genre movie that came out was Jurassic Park Dominion, which I didn't see, and Prey, as I mentioned earlier, the Predator movie set 300 years ago, which apparently set the world on fire, but he just went completely nuts. I did see it. I did enjoy it. I thought it was very well done. It is set in the Predator 2 universe. There's a little gag there that links straight back to Predator 2. But everything is usually either set in contemporary times or in the future. This time they went back in the 1700s, I think it was, and it was like, kind of worked. And it's like, yeah, good on for doing it. And there's two versions, one with his English voices and one with the Navajo, I think is the American indigenous people, their voices. Good on it for doing it. So it was kind of cool. And there was one movie, if you look up like the big hits or the big must-watch movies of 2022, something called Everything Everywhere All at Once or something similar to that. Which I know nothing about. I don't know if you've heard anything about it at all, but it seems to be doing quite well.
That was on my highlights list. Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was kind of a little bit Matrix, a little bit Twilight Zone, a little bit Time Agency kind of stuff. It got really good reviews. It was a good story. Again, I think it did better this year than it would in any other year just because there wasn't a lot of competition. So where a lot of people raved about it, I went and saw it. I thought that was good. It wasn't anything that was amazing. It wasn't a bad movie either, but it is, like I said, a very weird year to review because of the whole sort of vibe in the cinema.
A lot of it all comes down to sustainability for the future. So, like, for example, now we come from a certain generation. So when people say, oh, name some awesome sci-fi movies, you automatically think straight back to the 80s, your Aliens and Blade Runner and all that sort of stuff. So you do wonder if things that are produced today, 20 years from now, people are going to go back and go, oh, do you remember that Everything Everywhere All at Once? Or is it just going to get lost in the mist of time? Only, funnily enough, time will tell. Michael has mentioned here he's picked up the Rona. Oh, you didn't get it from us because we're perfectly okay. Aaron's already sort of over and done with it. So There you go, Michael. If you're laid up sick as a woofer, then at least you're joining wasting your sickness time with us, which is particularly groovy. So hang on. The only film I've seen this year was The Lost City of Melbourne. Oh, okay. So must be an independent. Never heard of that one. So we are going to touch on before we get to, as I said, our top 5. We're going to talk about the franchises, the big guns, and our just basic overview as to how they all went. So we're going to kick things off with good old Star Trek, and of course, Star Trek of this year did produce some new products. So I guess the second season of Picard was the main one. The first season of Strange New Worlds, Discovery's 4th season, and even Prodigy is still going, the animated series, which, unless you're a diehard Star Trek fan, you've probably never seen. Now, we've covered off Picard and Strange New Worlds in our own DNA reviews. I didn't watch Discovery season 4 at all. I just wasn't interested. But I know you've been on top of things. So what are your thoughts on the old Star Trek this year?
So I got about 4 or 5 episodes into Discovery and just gave up on it. It is one of those shows I really, really would love it because it's Star Trek, but it has just too many things, too many issues for me, and there's so much stuff to watch that I gave up on it. Loved Strange New Worlds. That was the pick of the bunch for me. You haven't put up Lower Decks. That was probably my second favorite Star Trek series, which I thought was fantastic. Picard, interesting to watch, didn't think was great, and Prodigy the same, interesting to watch, but didn't love it. So I did keep on top of most of the Treks. What was your pick of the Treks?
First off, did Lower Decks come out this year? Because I know it was last year.
Yeah.
It did. Okay. I can understand why that would be a very, very popular one. Well, I only really sort of watched Picard and Strange New Worlds, and I guess Strange New Worlds sort of did set the world on fire. As we discussed in our review show months ago, it was kind of funny that the last episode of Picard season 2 and the first episode of Strange New Worlds were on the same day. So it's almost like one was kicking the guts of the other, which I thought was a bit rough. They could have waited a week or two to let the Picard dust settle. So Picard, of course, brought back Q, and there's a whole story with the Q continuum, yada, 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 yada. It was, I guess, if you're a fan of the old next-gen material from the 90s, you dialed into it and go, oh, it's really, really cool. There's a few Easter eggs chucked in, and, of course, you've got Guinan and all the rest of it's the A-Team and the early version of Sung, Noonien Sung, the Brent Spiner character comes back, whereas Strange New Worlds effectively was all brand new stuff. And I think if you're going to say out of the lot, which is the one that kicked all the goals, other than the animated series, which I know a lot of fans like, I think Strange New Worlds was probably right up there. But I liked Discovery season 3. I just got to 4, and of course it's on Paramount Plus, and I just missed the lot. And it's funny, as we've discussed, even in the store, a lot of people just don't talk about it at all. It just doesn't get brought up. It's like when it comes to Star Trek, it's Picard, Strange New Worlds, and Discovery doesn't even exist, which is really bizarre. So
the Discovery for me is an interesting show because it's almost like they do a soft reboot every season. If you look at the Burnham in season 1, she is not the Burnham in season 2 and then series 3. And I think that isn't a reward for the long-time viewer, and that's why I probably gave up on it. Not enough cohesion with the direction the show wanted to go for me on that one.
And of course, the irony is that Strange New Worlds is a spin-off from Discovery, which fancy that, eh? So, it would be ironic if the spin-off actually ends up being far more successful, both financially and in the eyes of the fans and the viewing public, other than the host show, which, as we said, seems to have just died. But anyway, so Guy's mentioned he saw the movie Free Guy. Free Guy was excellent.
Yeah, it was.
I really did enjoy it, actually. It's about a guy who's in part of a computer simulation who wants to get away and escape reality, as it were. It was really enjoyable. And if anything, it sort of showed about the whole corporate greed thing that we see currently in real life with gaming companies, where they just want to maximize the profits regardless of whether the games are good or bad. But yeah, Free Guy was actually really, really good. So there you go. Colin, who's a big wig in Austrek, the Star Trek fan club, said this year hasn't been much chop. So it's interesting. Some years are better than others, and this one, I don't know. I don't think it'll be memorable at all. So yeah, anyway, not to worry.
Yeah.
Any final words on Star Trek before we move on?
Out of all of them, I am interested to see where Strange New World goes. So it's good when a series has a good enough hook that you're looking forward to the next series. So that one was the best one for me.
Cool. Roosie. All right, so we're going to kick it off for our number 5. So we're going to do this in alternating order. So I'm going to kick off with Aaron's top 5, and then it'll be mine, and then we'll go to some other franchises, and away we go. So the top 5 for Mr. Aaron. Now, we are, as we've said, it's not strictly sci-fi. We are sort of bending the rules a bit. It's the old thing, hey, it's our show. We'll do what we damn well like. So there's a bit of other genres chucked in for good measure. But number 5 for Mr. Aaron, check it out if you don't mind, umpire, is, well, hey, going for the old Doctor Strange, mate.
Yeah, so Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and when I was thinking about the movies and TV series I enjoyed the most for the year, it isn't one at the time that stood out as being this is one of the best movies I've seen. But when I think about it, it is one that I do enjoy the plot. I do enjoy rewatching it, and that's one of those things with movies. A lot of movies this year have been very disposable. They come, they go. You wouldn't watch them again. This one had the added bonus for me of being part of the Marvel universe, but also being directed by Sam Raimi. So I thought the visuals were a cut above the other stuff. We just have a huge Spider-Man movie, and it was very hard to follow that up. And I think they did it really well by taking this up a notch and maybe being a more adult movie just because of the horror content. And because everyone was so focused on what was happening in Spider-Man, they managed to slip some cameos and surprises into this one that did actually surprised me and I didn't see coming. Now, it wasn't the perfect movie, but it was a really, really good cinematic event for me. Did you enjoy this, Dags?
I did. I agree with you. So one part, I get a bit lost in the whole multiverse thing. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it's complete wank of just escape, getting out of jail free clauses for when continuity doesn't match up with other continuity. But I did like the horror element. I thought that was actually quite good because it was different and it was a little dark in that regard. And I did like it when you saw. I was thinking one of the other multiverses where the Avengers dudes turned up and they all get killed off, and I thought, oh, that's different. I think
Yeah.
Captain Carter's one of them and all that. So I did like that. So, but I do get a bit sort of like confused as to what's going on here. So, considering that of the movies that Marvel sort of produced this year, I can see. I knew you liked it, and I understand why. And if you like something a little bit different, it was definitely the way to go. So, yeah, all power to them. So, yeah, well done.
Yeah. Doctor Strange, really a Scarlet Witch movie, which isn't a bad thing either. I thought she was quite a good villain, and it is nice when
Yeah.
um, you actually have had Scarlet Witch and her journey makes sense, where you see what she's done, what she's lost. You had the TV series, and where she winds up in this movie isn't out of the blue, but it was a nice surprise because they did hide that she was going to be the main villain in this, in the trailers and everything.
It does work if you have an antagonist who you once knew as a protagonist, a good guy turned baddie, and her motivations are all justified, and you've seen the history of that, especially through WandaVision and all the rest of it. So, yeah, no, it's very, very groovy. So, whether in the years to come, it'll be on the list of like MCU's greatest. Probably not, but I think for people who really dialed into it like yourself, they'll remember it fondly for a while to come. So, good on them for doing something a little bit different. For me, my fifth one, and now I had to really go through. I picked no movies at all. I've just picked TV series, and of course, I've broken the rules. I've already gone completely into horror. I didn't even go as close to sci-fi on this one at all. But I did see this, and I dialed into it because there's a lot of stuff you see, and you go, okay, what do I really appreciate? What do I really like? What really, really pushes my buttons? And believe it or not, it was actually a South Korean TV series called All of Us Are Dead, and it's about a zombie outbreak at a high school. Now, to be fair, it's a long show. It's probably way longer than it needed to be. I think it's 8 or 9 episodes, runs for 8 hours or whatever. But for those who've been dialing into the South Korean zombie movie things, I think The Last Train to Busan was one of them. This was a bit of a follow-up. They are fantastic shows. They are really, really good. Now, the only sticking point is the fact that they've dubbed them into English. And of course, when they dub them into English, they say, well, okay, if the person's speaking Korean and they put the English dub on top, they try and match it so that the time the person speaks and the time that they stop speaking, the English dialogue fits in between. So some of the dialogue is a bit watered down and a bit wanky because they've got to try and make it fit rather than having the lips stop moving but the voice continuing. But I really loved it. It was just something that really pushed my buttons. I really dialed into it. The violence is fantastic, and the zombie thing is actually quite scary. So, and there's all these different characters, and you've got to learn all about who they all are because all school kids. And it was really enjoyable. It was just something that really worked for me. So, very left field because I don't mind. I'm not a zombie fan, but I do like some zombie shows. And this one I thought was right up there in terms of just quality because, as I said, after Train to Busan, which was outstanding, this was equally as good. There you go.
Yeah, I agree. I think we discussed it when it came out, actually. And I think I probably have the same opinion of you. It was probably an amazing 6 or 8 episode series, but the fact that it went for like 10 or 12 episodes maybe pushed it out just a little bit too long. What I do find when you see a Korean movie, or maybe any movie from another country, is they're not so set in the tick boxes that every Hollywood or Western movie kind of follows. So it'll do something, and you go, They can't do that. They can't. Kids can't do that. You can't, and they do. And that's one of the things I really love about, especially Netflix, which will give you the choice of these movies or series that you probably haven't had a chance to see before, or wouldn't be the choice. And when you see something like that, and it's a Korean movie, and it goes to #1 in the week in Netflix, you know that's going to be a quality watch, or a good watch for anyone who likes horror anyway.
Yeah, the quality is outstanding, and you are right. Seeing kids killing other kids is like, yeah, that's not gonna. I can't see Disney signing off on one of those. There you go. And for that reason, because it is a high school, I mean, and they actually do use young actors who are probably potentially just after high school students in terms of their age, and
Yeah.
it's very believable, and absolutely loved it. So, but anyway, so that was my number 5. Now, so covering back off into the big genre stuff that's been occurring this year. So we saw what Star Trek had going for it. Let's move into the other star. So we've got the old Star Wars, which has been very busy this year. No movies for them. They've just gone TV series after TV series. It's their thing at the moment. They've had some definite hits and misses. But overall, between, say, Star Trek and Star Wars, I think the Star Wars sort of environment has gone quite well. A lot of shows that were eagerly waited may or may not have sort of tapped audiences' enthusiasm. But anyway, we're at the end of the year, and they've produced a fair bit of content. And I know we've sort of discussed some of these episodes and reviewed them in detail, but overall, old son, what are your thoughts?
I think Star Wars is, you can't lose with Star Wars. I think the Star Wars fan base is probably a little bit more resilient than the Star Trek one to criticism as well, just because Star Wars is a bigger and more diverse universe. And I say that with respect to Star Trek, but I do think Star Trek are all on the Enterprise or on a space station, where Star Wars has an entire universe. It can explore a lot of different things. That said, they haven't all been goals. Some of them have just kicked points for me. Boba Fett was, I'd have to say, good but disappointing. Obi-Wan was some really good highs when it was doing it well, and then some lows when it wasn't doing it well. The standout for me was Andor, which we've just done weeks and weeks and reviews of. But I do think if you like a more intelligent Star Wars, this is the one for you. And then Tales of the Jedi was a great one too, if you just like little stories that concentrate on different parts of the Star Wars universe with popular characters that people have wanted to see fleshed out. So they really do cater for a wide range of stuff, and it's okay if you don't like everything. I think that's the thing with Star Wars. You don't have to like everything in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a whole lot of material that's aimed at different audiences, and it's worked quite well. So if you like your animation stuff and your Bad Batches, away you go. If you like your Disney fluffy stuff, you've got your Obi-Wans and Boba Fett. And if you like your hardcore adult stuff, then you go to Andor. But yeah, it seems like Lucasfilm / Disney have said, no, it's definitely movies aren't the go now. It's all TV series. They're keeping them relatively short, except for Andor, which was about 13 episodes. And it's like, hey, if you don't like this one, just wait for the next one. And they're sort of churning them out pretty quickly now. Tales of the Jedi was one of the last things that came out. Only goes for 6 episodes, and they're pretty short. So it's covering off some stories with Ahsoka, as well as what was going on with Count Dooku prior to the Phantom Menace, I think. And it's good. I tend to agree. There's some good material there. The problem, of course, is that when they announce a show, there's a lot of expectation, a lot of a build-up, and sometimes it does fall flat on its face. But as we always like to say, the people who hate Star Wars the most are Star Wars fans. So how good is that? But there's something for everyone. And of course, they're just going to continue to just produce a lot of material. So their production lines must be working overtime at the moment, which is very good.
And there's not a shortage of Star Wars things being offered up on the plate in the near future either, because we've got the Ahsoka series and new Bad Batch and new Mandalorian. So quite a bit of stuff on the way. So the good thing about Star Wars is it used to just be the movies, and we'd complain about all these other shows have millions of episodes. Now Star Wars fans have got a lot of different series to choose from as well.
Yeah, and even though some of the stories on some shows may not be as good as other shows, the production quality in all of them is outstanding. They all look like the galaxy far, far away. Just winding back a little bit regarding the zombie movie in South Korea. Hey, think about it. Nerds killing the popular bullies. Well, that's pretty much what happens, which is kind of cool. Because in the All of Us Are Dead, not all the zombies when they die stay dead. They do actually. It's kind of funny, isn't it? Dead zombies coming back even with a whack in the head. so they do come back with a bit of an attitude. Guy said so much Star Wars now. There's a lot to catch up on with Gavin, who's not watching tonight. He just got Disney Plus only about a month or two ago, and I think his eyes got square eyes now trying to watch everything that's happening. Like Battle Royale, no, not really. Battle Royale is more like Hunger Games. So that's obviously the story of putting all these school kids on an island and they kill each other to the last one standing. So that's, not exactly like that at all. And William said he's checked out of Star Wars. There's too much content to watch. And there is. So in the end, just pick and choose, right? Just select your shows, and if you don't like them, just wait half an hour. It's like Melbourne weather. If you don't like it, just wait half an hour. It'll be completely different. So very, very good, which is particularly cool. So yeah, Star Wars overall has done well for itself this year, and it's going strength to strength, which is particularly cool. That brings us to number 4. What's our top 4 of the shows and movies that we've seen this year that have really pushed our buttons? Once again, kicking off with Mr. Aaron. And what have you all got? You've got a little bit of this. Werewolf by Night, mate.
Yeah, so this is one of the Marvel specials that slipped out on Disney Plus on Halloween. And it's based on, I guess, the Marvel horror universe, where we've mainly had the superhero universe. These are the same characters in the same universe, but it's the darker side of Marvel. It was black and white, atmospheric. It was an hour long, so it was a pretty good story that raced along. Because the characters were more obscure ones, there was sort of nothing to get offended about because they changed anyone or anything like that. And it sort of dropped before anyone knew it was coming out. So all of a sudden there's this amazing horror holiday special with Marvel characters on Disney Plus. I can't think of anything bad about it. It looked fantastic. It raced along because it was an hour, and I don't think I saw anyone come into the shop and say, "Oh, that was a load of crap." Everyone loved it.
The 2 pictures I saw were black and white. Was it a black and white show?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's kind of cool. You can imagine somebody saying, "Oh, we want it to be black and white," and you say, "Oh my god, I've just bought a 4K color TV. Who wants it in black and white?" But good on them for doing it. So that's actually very, very groovy.
So yeah, that was a surprise, but a good one, and it wasn't so long ago. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out.
Very good. So I missed what you said earlier. I was reading something. You said was it a movie?
It's a hour special. So
really?
It just they just brought it out. It's got I guess you don't want to spoil who's in it, but it's got, there's the popular Marvel heroes, but they've also done Werewolf by Night and different horror. And you get some cameos and some main characters of some of the horror side of Marvel, and I think it's popular enough that it'll spring into other things as well.
Very good. It's good to see that some of the big powerhouses are sort of prepared to take a bit of a risk here and there and do something a little bit different. The chances are somebody said, "Here's an idea. It's 1 hour. If it doesn't work, you haven't lost much. But if it's a great success, you never know. It could be leading into something quite new." So
William is actually spot on there. It's Marvel doing Universal 40s horror.
Well, they were trying to do that anyway. I don't know if Marvel were, but I mean, remember when they released The Mummy, and then they did, what was it, the follow-up one that they did, and it kind of all died in the ass. They were trying to really touch into the whole Universal monster thing, and it kind of didn't work. I think
where the Tom Cruise Mummy took the Mummy and updated it, what Marvel have done is taken the Marvel characters and then make it look like the 40s and 50s traditional Universal horror, which really works for me.
Good stuff. For myself, for number 4, I really couldn't split them. I was really, really torn on this one, so I've decided to stick them together. One of them was sort of already covered off already. So I had to sort of like tie it up between Strange New Worlds, the Star Trek series, as we discussed earlier, because I did actually enjoy it. I mean, it didn't like, oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever, but it kind of like worked for me, and I could see where they were coming from. And I didn't mind the old Stranger Things season 4, which I thought was quite good. I don't think it was the strongest of the 4 seasons, but I certainly got a lot out of it and really enjoyed it. And I like where the story's going. And it's a bit darker too, a bit more nasty, a bit more violent. All the characters are going in different directions, doing different things. And I found it quite entertaining, and it kind of worked for me. So, and the fact that they keep the actor continuity the whole way through, which is really good, even though they're all aging now, because one of the things that work for Stranger Things that they all start off as little kids. Now they're all like practically adults. And I guess if you like seeing them as kids like you did in season 1, you go, mate, I'm really dialing into this. And now you see them as adults. You kind of like, it's almost like they're different people, but that aside. But Stranger Things for Netflix has done really, really well. It's been a bit of a showcase program for them. And the 4th season came out this year, and I go, yeah, it's kind of worked for me. So, but I couldn't split the 2. I wouldn't say either was the greatest thing ever, but they certainly didn't disappoint either. So, what do you reckon?
Yeah. I had both of those on my honourable mentions list because they both were great. I didn't put them down mainly because we'd already talked about Strange New Worlds, and I wanted to sort of look at other stuff because a top 5 is pretty limited. Stranger Things was fantastic, and it probably only didn't get onto the list for me because I did like the first series better.
Yeah.
I think that's the benchmark, and this was probably the best series after the first series.
Yeah.
Unless it topped the first series, it's not going to make it onto the top 5 of the year for me, kind of thing. That said, can't wait to see the last series where they go and how they finish it off.
Well, that's right. And like, I think what worked with this first series here was so grounded in the 80s, and that people believed it was almost made in the 80s. It was very, very clever, very ingeniously thought out. And of course, once you get a few years later, it's more character driven rather than environmentally driven. But it all worked. It was good. And it's definitely their flagship show in terms of sci-fi / supernatural horror for Netflix, and good on them too.
I'll tell you,
Marcus said Stranger Things, the whole family watched it and enjoyed it. Well, you can, because there's so much to dial into. There's saying all these different characters all doing different things, and of course, in season 4, they all split up and go in different directions. There's a lot to sort of dial into, and it was good fun. So yeah,
I'll tell you, with what you were saying earlier about in the future, will people look back on stuff and say, is it memorable or is it? I do think Stranger Things will be a series that won't be forgotten. They've future-proofed it by already setting it in the 80s. So it doesn't matter when you watch it in the future. It's like this little bubble of time in the 80s. And I think that's really smart.
Which is funny because 20 years from now, somebody will hear about this show called Stranger Things thinking it was physically made in the 80s because it's set in the 80s. That'll be an interesting sort of thing. But I agree with you too. It is one that will stand the test of time. So that was my number 4. And as I said, Strange New Worlds I added in as well because I did actually enjoy it, which was particularly cool. All right, so we've covered off 2 of the big 3 franchises. So you had the Star Trek, we've gone Star Wars. Now, good old Doctor Who did have some stuff come out this year, probably not anywhere near as much material as in the other 2. But I know you had your thoughts and views about how this year went for as far as Doctor Who was concerned, and no doubt next year or the year after is the way to go. But anyway, I'm still a part of 2022. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it would have probably been better as of a one-off we had done the review of Power of the Doctor rather than Legend of the Sea Devils, because I do think it was one of the episodes that anyone could enjoy if you were a fan, because it was absolutely loaded with fan service. And fan service is, of course, when you have references to things from the past that are gonna please people who grew up in different eras. And this, of course, was the 100th centenary special for the BBC. So it was an excuse for them to say, hey, we'll put the story on the back burner, and we will actually talk about the history of the show or load it. And even though again, the story wasn't the greatest story, it's one of those things I have to forgive it because there were so many moments in it where I'm like, oh, that got me in the emotions. Oh, Tegan's back. Oh, Ace is back. Oh, the old doctors are back. Oh, they've done it in a way that I can understand it and it doesn't seem contrived. And, sometimes if a story works on an emotional level, I'm happy to forgive it on a story level just because you walk away from it feeling good. And I don't think anyone could have walked away from Power of the Doctor and not found something in it they didn't like, although Doctor Who fans are a curmudgeonly bunch. So, of course, there's going to be some people who did. So it kind of redeemed at least the end of the Jodie Whittaker era for me for going out on a bang. Did you check it out, Dags?
No, I didn't watch it. Marcus said, yeah, Power the Doctor got him on board again in a very nostalgic episode, as you said, for the fanboys, which is good. So, yeah, I mean, there's no secret that Doctor Who over the past couple of years has sort of struggled and has sort of divided the fan base a little bit. And now it sounds like they're all coming back together again. So, if anything, you could say 2022 is finishing on a high for the franchise. So, good on them. See where the wind takes them. Yay, team. And if everybody's back on board, as Marcus said, then all power to it. So,
yeah.
Watch this space, as they say. Very good. All right, so that brings us to the top 3. Oh, guys, what makes the top 3 for Aaron and myself of our top 5 picks of the year? Very exciting stuff. So, Mr. Aaron, once again, he's plucked this one out. I hadn't even heard of this. So, I'll be curious to see what everybody else thinks. But, of course, you've gone for a show called The Menu.
Well, this was a movie, and it was just in the cinema just this month. And I guess it's a weird one. It's not really sci-fi, but like I said, it's one of those ones where we're just going through what we like the most. And this was a psychological horror, I guess. It's got a fantastic cast, and it is one of the most, I guess, amazingly put together movies I've seen at the cinema for a while. Each act is basically a different menu item as they work through this incredibly amazing curated menu, and it's an invite only thing. And basically, the chef has invited people from his past that have done him wrong, and he's out to kill them all. But the way it unfolds and explains the motivations and explains the horribleness of the people who are there. And one person is there who shouldn't have been there because she's a last minute substitute. So the chef is not happy that there's actually a nicer person there. And the way it all plays out, and what it did for me as well, the preview, if you watch it, makes it look like you get to the island and the chef says, right, we're going to cook you, and you'll run off and try and hide. When you got there, it wasn't like that at all. I said to Neil, my wife, who doesn't like horror, you could have watched this movie and enjoyed it because it was a smart horror psychological movie. So it's still in the cinema. If you want to see a movie over Christmas holidays, I'd recommend this one.
What's on the menu? Very, very cool. Yeah, sorry, I do remember it was a film there. It wasn't a TV series, but very good. Something a little bit different, a little bit left field. Be sure to check it out. So there you go. Colin has said, just harping back to Stranger Things, the biggest fan would have to be Kate Bush here because they keep playing Running Up That Hill over and over and over again in the headphones. I'll tell you what, that would just drive you batshit after a while, but good on them too. Very, very cool. I'll have it from the vial. I'll have an order 66, 4 fried Jedi and a Coke. That's a menu. Or just plain white bread. Was it bread or toast?
Toast. Plain white toast. Jake, Elwood.
Very, very good. Absolutely love it. Very good. All right, so that was Aaron's the third one. For myself, I guess this was a bit of a no-brainer. Everybody, I mean, I find when people talk about shows, that almost turns me off them, actually, because it's like, oh, my God, I'm just here. The gush fest just drives me batshit. Then after a while, I'll give it a go, and I go, oh, actually, it wasn't that bad after all. And, of course, for me, it had to be The Orville Season 3. I liked it. I thought it was good. They come up with some very interesting concepts, some very interesting story ideas, made some very interesting twists. And it was very well done. Now, I know there's been a lot of discussions between fans regarding the Star Trek shows and the Orville shows, and Orville is the Star Trek it should have been and all that sort of stuff. I don't buy into that discussion at all, but I just take it at face value for what it is. And I guess a few people were a little bit critical of Season 3, thinking that some of the humor in that had been removed and it had got all very, very serious. But I actually found it to be quite good, and they did enough different things to make it thought-provoking and for people to go, oh, that's actually quite good. And one of the stories that really worked for me is when the guy gets trapped in the past and he stays there for all these years and ends up with a family and everything like that. You know, he's got a wife and kid and whatever, and he's still got to go back to the future again. And I thought that's a very interesting, different twist on this typical story that you see of people getting left in time. And there's a whole other range of stories that came through, and there's a nice little arc that goes through the whole lot. I think the Orville has, especially Season 3, was really good and really, really worked for me. Did you see it, I assume?
I did. I thought out of the 3 seasons, they're all about even for me. I do like all of the Orville. This one, like you were saying, probably didn't have as much humor as the first 2, particularly the first half of this season. It seemed to me that they said, we're just going to write Star Trek. We're dropping the humor completely. And I don't know if that's a good thing because I like the humor in the Orville. That's what kind of gave it a bit of humanity where Star Trek can come off sterile sometime. Totally agree. The standout was the time travel episode and the repercussions of going back in time, which you don't see much. What I do find with the Orville, Star Trek should be doing the Orville stories, where the Orville actually finds a story that is currently in the news or has something to do with current affairs, and they tackle it head on and they don't dodge from side to side, where Star Trek has almost become too apologetic to do that anymore. And that was the series that started it. So there's a lot of episodes of the Orville which are tackling things Star Trek should be tackling, and much, much better than Star Trek. I don't know if you see that or feel that as well.
Well, it's interesting because, for the original series of Star Trek back in the 60s, that's exactly what they did. They took current topics and put them in the Star Trek universe. And, of course, when you see them in Star Trek, you can go, well, friggin' hell, the answer to this is obvious. it should be this is what you should do. But of course, you relate that to real life, and you go, oh, you can't do that. And you go, hang on, why is it different? And I agree with you. Taking topical issues and putting them into a sci-fi setting is a very clever way of getting people to really think about it. And it was, yeah.
The Orville actually often goes more into Earth history than Star Trek does. Where Star Trek has looked at pop culture, they often make up their own sort of in-universe stuff like Dr. Chaotica and things like that. Where Orville is happy to go, oh, we're just going to reference Dolly Parton. We're going to do this and this and this, and actually, and it sort of gives it more of a grounding in humanity than Star Trek sometimes has, which is what I really like about the Orville.
I can only work on the view that it's because they can take more risks. I mean, the Star Trek franchise's big 50-year plus thing it's a behemoth, it's a beast, whereas Orville is just 3 seasons. So they can take all these risks, and no one's going to say, well, you can't do that because 15 years ago there was a movie here and 60 years ago there was a TV show there. So, yeah, but it works for them, and it really does. But I'm definitely not one who says, well, you should compare the two. As far as I'm concerned, they're separate entities, and you take them as separate entities. And even though there's a lot of similarities between them, but I also think too, taking the humor out, I had no problem with that whatsoever. Even though I agree with you, that's kind of what made the show so popular in the first place. Colin has made a mention about the fact that the Orville's a good show. Jeffro said that it was the best season so far. I think what works for a lot of these shows is if you've got a short season, every episode has to be a winner, right? You can't have filler fluff. You can't have stuff that's just a waste of time. And if everyone is a good episode, then you're guaranteed to do really well for yourself. So the Vile said, visually didn't think the Orville could be better, but season 3 was an awesome show. So, yeah, very good. So something out there if you haven't seen. Sorry, dude.
Sorry, the Orville is actually a show. This is the opposite to Discovery, actually, where it actually rewards viewers who stick with it over different seasons. Because what I found about Discovery is they kind of retool it every year. In the Orville, they'll take a character that was just a one-off character 2 seasons ago, and they bring them back. And if you are following it, that's a really good continuity, and it actually gives the audience, you know, some credit for actually being able to follow stuff rather than it being disposable and have to have it lead everything through there by hand. I mean, the episode on the planet where you can swipe up and swipe down someone's popularity, and then the girl comes back and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that was a good episode, and they are following up on it. It's like Star Trek never goes back to the worlds where they've had first contact with, where the Orville kind of feels like that universe is still there.
It's an interesting sort of. It's almost something like. I'll start again. It's almost like a bit of history repeating itself. Just quickly, because if you remember from the 1990s, you had Deep Space Nine and you had Babylon 5, 2 TV shows that were based on space stations. Now, Deep Space Nine is a part of the Star Trek franchise. Babylon 5 was on its own, and there was a lot of arguments between fans as to which was the better show. Fast forward to today, and of course, you got Discovery, which for a period of time before Strange New Worlds was the flagship show of the Star Trek franchise as of today. And then Orville comes along, and there's like this massive conflict between what fans like. They're watching Discovery, they don't like it. They watch Orville, they love it. And I think the timing is just unfortunate. If Orville came out, say, 6 years from now, or even like 6 years ago, would have been awesome. But because the two of them are together, there's a lot of comparisons. And I think that's a bit unfortunate. And clearly, by the sounds of it, good old Star Trek Discovery in particular has come off second best. But if the discussions ever take place between, say, Orville and Strange New Worlds, that could be a different discussion, especially once season 2 of Strange New Worlds comes out. So interesting stuff. Very, very cool. All right, so we're going to move on with our big ass franchises as to who's who in the zoo. And, of course, this time we're talking about good old DC. And the funny thing I found about good old DC is, aside from a couple of movies, most of their stuff this year's been all animated. I don't know if you've picked up on that at all, old son.
Well, it hasn't been. It's just that all the movies that were meant to come out this year were pushed back, because we were meant to have about 3. Do you remember at the beginning of the year, we went and saw the Batman, and there was a trailer, and it was 2022, the year of DC. We've got Black Adam, we've got The Flash, we've got Aquaman, we've got, I think there was another one. And all they really brought out was Super Pets and Black Adam. And that seemed like a real big disappointment compared to what you were expecting the year to be. Now, admittedly, there was stuff behind the scenes with controversy and legal stuff that just meant that DC got annihilated. And it looks like they've done it again behind the scenes, because we were all happy because Henry Cavill's coming back and he's happy about it. And now that's all gone. And everyone was happy James Gunn was coming in, but because he's got rid of Henry Cavill, now people have got hashtag fire James Gunn, and it's got millions and millions of. I just want to see the damn movies. I don't want all this contra. I just want him to make good movies and put them in the cinemas.
It really is a case it seems with DC, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back in a lot of instances for the part, not just yesterday, for the past X many years. And you just scratch your head going, guys, what the hell are you doing? You're actually sabotaging your own products. And you are right. So the Batman comes out at the start of the year. We saw it and we reviewed it in DNA reviews. We thought it was really, really good, actually, a little bit different, a little bit of left field, but hey, it kind of works for it. Then it's like crickets chirping for months. And then you got, as you said, Black Adam comes out. And you are right, in the interim, what was it? Batgirl gets the ass. They go, no, we're not going to show that anymore. And all this stuff just caves in on itself. And if DC's focus is just on animated films, that clearly is not going to get them the lion's share of the market. And it's just like, it's almost like self-sabotaging. And you are right, the whole thing of Henry Cavill being booted from Superman, it's just almost going from bad to worse. And you do wonder, how the hell are they going to get out of this to the point where they can be on equal footing with Marvel? And at the moment, I don't know, this year's been a bad year for them, I think, even though it started off so well.
You look at just The Flash, it is the whole, it's cursed. I don't know what they did, but they filmed it with Michael Keaton, and then they decided that wasn't going to happen, so they took him out and they refilmed it and they put Henry Cavill in, and now he was in for a couple of months and now he's back out, so they're having to re-edit it again and take him out. Does it really matter? Because they've got 3 more movies and they're just going to reboot the universe anyway, so why just not leave it and let the fans see what they want? I don't know what they're trying to do. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, I don't know, but I would assume that inside the big powerhouse that's DC, there's just too much power struggles going on between this person, and we want to go this way, this person wants to go that way, this person wants to go that way, and there's just no cohesive direction. And for stuff like this, it needs to be cohesive. It needs to work. Sure, sometimes things can go against you that you didn't expect, like we did with the Ezra Miller thing and whatever else. But for the most part, if you're sabotaging your own product and there's actually billions of dollars at stake in terms of revenue, you just got to get your head out of your ass. Now, if the MCU scenario, if MCU didn't exist, it just wasn't there at all, they could get away with it, like what happened in the 1990s with DC movies, which some were good and some were complete shit. But MCU is there. And they must be laughing their heads off in the boardrooms at Marvel and going, mate, look at these cockeyed. They've got no idea what they're in. They've probably got a building across the way. They've got binoculars. They can see them in the boardrooms. And they go, mate, look at these freaking turkeys over there. They've got no idea. Whereas DC's competition are completely on top of things. So, but either way, I think it's safe to say, other than probably the Batman, DC's year 2022 has been a bit of a letdown. So
it is very telling that Marvel have had a year that most people have said have been average, and yet it still has blown DC out of the water.
Yeah. The irony of that, eh? So there you go. With that in mind, that actually brings us to our good old top 2. Our top 2, what are they going to be, fans? As it turned out for Mr. Aron, it is the Batty Dude.
Yeah, so we did do a review on this when it came out because we went and saw it and thought it was good enough to do an on-the-spot review. And I do think it is probably the best superhero from my point of view, in my opinion, that came out this year. It was the Batman movie I wanted, which is basically, I was so sick of the politics that are going on with the rest of the DC universe. It was actually refreshing to go and see a movie, wasn't connected to any other movie, had a story and a plot that was totally covered in the one movie, self-contained, good movie, dark, surprised me because I wasn't looking forward to his portrayal of Batman, and he was a good Batman. And it was good enough that even outside all of the stuff that's going on with DC, they've said, yes, we're going to leave that alone and we're going to let that series run concurrently. So that was probably the best superhero movie of the year for me.
Yeah, I can certainly see that being an obvious choice, actually. They did do very well with it. I think the fact that it is pretty much a standalone thing. Because remember when it was announced that Robert Pattinson was going to be playing the Batty Dude, people were, oh my God, he's from Twilight. He's going to be complete garbage. But it worked quite well. The actual product was very enjoyable. But there was no follow-up, unfortunately. It was sort of like it came out and went, and that's it. It's just lost in the midst of time. So, but yes, I tend to agree with you. It was they did a good job with it, and it worked very, very well. Chrissy said, "Yeah, don't insult the turkeys. They were way than DC." It was probably. I mean, I didn't see Black Adam, but I mean, at least seems for the DC's 2022, their one shining light through the entire year was the Batman, and good on them
Yeah.
for it as well. But it seems like every time DC are producing a movie, a lot of people are more skeptical than anticipatory, going, "Oh my god, it's gonna be awesome." They're all like, "Oh, I don't know." And Batman was a good surprise. So well done to them. For my number 2, I guess if you've been following our reviews throughout the year, this is a bit of an easy one. So for me, it was Andor. So the Star Wars series, something I'd been waiting years for when they first announced it. I think it was back in 2017 or 18 or whatever else. A series that I was hoping would be dark and nasty, and it was dark and nasty. And of course, we've reviewed this in detail every single episode. I think it was definitely the highlight of all the Star Wars shows. Most of the Star Wars series that came out were good, but they had faults, and they were glaring faults. Whereas I think Andor had no faults at all. If there was a downside to it, and this is the reason why I marked it at number 2, is that it was a bit on the slow side. Whereas, and it was, it did. In hindsight, maybe they could have condensed it down a few extra episodes and just not made it so long, because there was definitely bits where it was you had to really sit and grind through it. But in terms of its quality, as we've discussed before, I couldn't knock it. So, all good.
I think Andor could have easily been on my top 5. The reason it wasn't was probably because the first 2 episodes where it was 2 superfluous episodes. If they could go and refilm that and do something different, I almost think they should, because it was a turn off to a lot of people. And then after those 2 episodes, it was fantastic for the rest of the series. And the other thing is, we have spoke about Andor, like Dag said, the show's an hour long and we're on an hour and a half talking about every episode. So I thought we'd pretty much said everything we had to about Andor. But if you haven't seen it, definitely give it a chance. It's a fantastic series.
Yeah, so Colin said Andor was his number 1 series for 2022, which is particularly cool. And so it kind of worked for me. All right, so where are we? I've completely lost track of where we are. Yes. So we've covered off like Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who. I've gone to DC, and of course the last one in terms of the big bunnies who are out there, of course, was the aforementioned Marvel. And they seem to have gone from strength to strength this year, both in their movies, which may or may not have been as successful as previous years, but the quality's been there and the content's been there, and of course their TV series. I haven't been really on top of much of it at all, but you're a bit more au fait with your stuff. MCU for the year, how did it go?
Yep. So I've seen everything, and like I said, probably hasn't been the most well-received year for Marvel, where I think, again, it's a case of filming stuff in lockdown and having to change things around. In the case of Wakanda Forever, the lead actor dying and maybe them having to put something into play that was totally different from what they expected. Marvel has done the dividing the audience this year with a lot of their product, especially things like Thor, Love and Thunder, and maybe She-Hulk, where they were either too comical driven, or with She-Hulk, not what people were expecting. And I think Marvel is like Star Wars. There's enough product there. You don't have to like everything. It isn't all for you. Miss Marvel was made for teenage girls. So guys my age probably are not going to think it's the best TV series ever made. But I appreciate it's there because, when I was growing up, there was a lack of science fiction and quality fantasy stuff on TV. Now to be able to pick and choose and go, I really like this and I can binge the lot, or I don't like this, I can leave it. That's a fantastic way for me to be living at the moment, I feel.
Yeah, I've worked on the view that over the past few years, and I have said this publicly, that when you make this is MCU, and your products are that good, you're going to get to a point where you go, how do you improve on them? And you kind of can't. And the follow-up shows end up being a bit of a letdown. You go, well, and I think in this year that was the case. Like, for example, last year we had the big shows like your WandaVisions and the Falcon and Winter Soldier and Loki and all that sort of stuff. You get to this year, and it's like, well, what do we got? And then, like, the first thing that I saw was, I think, was Moon Knight, and I got into one episode. It's like, man, that's just not doing anything for me at all. And I guess even though it's all part of the Phase 4 and all this sort of business, and it's all one big arcing story, I think that when you just produce products that are that good, you're invariably going to struggle just trying to keep the momentum going. Now, with the 3 movies that came out, like even you mentioned, like I think privately, like Wakanda Forever, it was a follow-off of Black Panther, but nowhere near as good as Black Panther. And I think they've got to be sort of mindful of the fact that they can produce all this stuff, but they can't get it right all the time. And I don't know if the audience has been as invested in a lot of this stuff as we've seen, because your store is a good example where people come in and go, have you seen the latest episode of this? Have you seen the latest episode of that? I know She-Hulk has been very popular with a lot of people, or at least been at the talking point. But a lot of the other shows, People just missed them, just didn't discuss them at all. And that gave me the impression that people just weren't watching them. So that's how I judge how things are going, by what happens in your shop.
Yeah, I think that is a really good way to put your finger on the pulse, because anyone can shout on the internet and be really loud, positive or negative, but just the buzz you get from the general people who collect this stuff and watch it coming into the shop is a good way to judge how things are going down. And like I said, I think this whole year has been a bit strange. I think people, well, it's not as many people around because of lockdowns, and they're still coming out of sort of the COVID mentality. And a lot of the shows are not probably what they expected because of the way productions have been or the way they've had to ride around COVID. So it's just been an unusual year.
Yeah, you do wonder sometimes if you need to quit while you're ahead. You get to end game, do the follow-up TV shows, done. All your main characters, and then you're starting to introduce all these other people, and you're hoping that the audience will invest their time and energy like they did with Iron Man and Captain America and all the rest of it. And if that doesn't happen, you're kind of struggling. But having said that, you'll always get at least a good success story in there somewhere. But yeah, as you said, you can't guarantee that all of them are going to be an absolute winner right across the board. But either way, they've certainly done a lot better than, say, what DC have done. So
yeah,
very good. All right, now that actually brings us to our numero uno. So you've heard us discussing our stuffs. Our top fives are now up to number one. I could say to people out there, take guesses as to what we think our number ones happen to be. I don't think you'll get Aaron's in a million years. He's just really left field. But it's particularly cool. And this is your number one pick for 2022 out of sci-fi / pop culture movies and TV shows you got from.
Yeah, so I don't know if this was watched by a lot of people or people knew what it was about. This by far was the best TV series on this year. If you like horror, if you like mystery, if you like sci-fi, if you like complicated plots that actually seem to be leading somewhere and add up, this is the show for you. And nobody heard about it. The way I could describe this is, if you remember the series Salem's Lot with vampires mixed with Lost, where they're all trapped. And it's basically a space warp where people drive into this town, and when they drive into the town, they try and drive out the other side and they just come back in. You cannot get out of the town. You try and hike out of it and you just come back into it. And at night, the vampires come out, or the demons, or whatever they are, because you're not sure what they are. And it slowly builds on that mythology. And every episode, it adds new things like faraway trees, which are trees that are hollow that you can transport through. And then the people who are monitoring things. And you get all these people from different areas of America. Basically, they take a wrong turn and end up in this town, and they're all from different states, but they all wound up in this town, and they've all got different skills and stuff. And in one episode, the guy's talking about he designs games for fun parks, and you go, well, not game rides, and down the track, his engineering skills come into it and stuff. And it is one of those, week by week, it builds up, and you are just compelled and want to know what happens next. And then the series ends, and there is a series 2. So it's not one of those you invest in all these characters and then that's the end of it. It is the show. I watched the whole show, binged. It's only about 8 episodes. Then watched the whole thing again with my wife, and she thought it was fantastic. And I just can't wait to see where it goes from here.
I couldn't help but laugh when you said, "Oh, they got it, get into a town, they can't get out of it." I think, "Oh, it's got to be Canberra." So no one can ever get out of Canberra. But there you go. So something to check out. And you are right. Sometimes these independent, small things that get produced, stuck on a streaming service somewhere. Someone sees it, says, "Oh, check this out," and you have a look and go, "Freaking hell, that is bloody awesome!" And it doesn't need multi-million-dollar like mega studios behind them and big budgets and massive stars to make them work. It's just good quality storytelling and good quality drama. So a guy said he's not heard of it. I bet you're not the only one, Mr. Guy. So
definitely check it out. And they even take a knock at Lost, where they're trying to work out what's happened, and they've got a wall, and they're writing all the scenarios it could be on the wall, and they've put in on the wall for you to read, "Are we all dead?" which was the plot from Lost. And so obviously that was a knock at Lost. I really hope that the showrunners actually know in their head where this is going, because it would be disappointing if it just will disappeared up its own ass. But it is the show this year that I was most surprised about. No one's heard of. And if you watch the first episode, you will want to watch the whole thing in one go, binge the whole lot.
Love it. Yeah, the Lost thing was obviously intentional because it is made the same executive producer, which is very, very cool. For myself, number one, and I had to go through and really look at it and think, oh, yeah, I remember when this came out and it worked for me. Now, not everybody liked it, and I don't give a shit. It worked for me, pushed my buttons, and I thought, well done to them. It cost a lot of money. It did very well. Like, sort of, for those who saw it, I think dialed into it, but a lot of people sort of didn't. I know you'll get where I'm coming from in a second, but I saw this and I go, you know what? This is my movie for the TV show for the year. It was Halo. We have never discussed Halo at any point throughout the entire year, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Even though it doesn't follow the story of the game at all, I didn't care. It looked grouse, and you can clearly see where the money went. The world building was outstanding. All the situation from the covenant, the Spartans. The story's a little bit Hollywood. You know, the Master Chief, he's taking his chip out of his back, and he's trying to sort of like do his own thing, so to speak. But I found visually it really worked for me. I absolutely loved it. I found it very entertaining, and it was just one of those things when I got to the end of it, I go, you know what, that was well worth waiting for. But I do know that a lot of game watchers who are really invested in Halo, the game, couldn't stand it. And I thought, well, that's unfortunate, but they had to go in their own direction. And for that reason, and like no one ever discussed Halo. It's like, well, am I the only one who actually saw it and liked it? Certainly appeared that way. But I thought visually it was outstanding. And the first episode where the Covenant attacked the base for all the people, and they bring in all the weapons, and it's just blood and guts everywhere. They didn't hold back on the violence either, but it was good and had a really, really good, solid story. So I assume you saw Halo, but we have never discussed it.
Yeah, no, I really loved Halo. It is one of those shows, I have to say, from the feedback in the shop, everybody hated it, and because it was gamers who they took the core story and changed it so much they couldn't reconcile with what they were seeing on the screen. And as a fan of franchises, I can understand that, because I do hate it. Even with Wednesday, which I think is a fantastic series, is not a good Addams Family series. If you're going to do a franchise and you pay for that franchise, the first thing you should do is make sure the fans are happy with it. I had never played Halo, so I thought it was a fantastic series. And I had people laugh at me for saying I thought it was a fantastic series, but they were like, oh, the Spartans and Master Chief, they shouldn't do that. I'm like, not in my head. That doesn't affect me in the same way. So I did think it was one of those fantastic series this year as well.
I guess it works on the point of view that if you're saying, okay, let's assume, for example, you've got a billion gamers who play Halo, but you make a story that'll appeal to 2 billion, but 1 billion none of those will be the gamers, if that makes sense. So you're thinking, okay, you cut your losses. Otherwise, if you follow the story of the game, your 1 billion people dial into it, but you've lost the other two. So I guess it's weight of numbers. And it did work for it. And that was the thing. So, I mean, I have played Halo, but I don't know the story. And I don't really sort of care about it. It's a bit like what happened with Masters of the Universe in the 80s when they just didn't even follow the He-Man story at all. But it worked. For the most part, it worked. So it's about how to get the public engaged. And I guess that was the way they went down, the path they went down. So you alienate this group, but you bring in this other group. And there's a question here. Joshua asked which streaming service. I actually don't know. I don't think it's available anywhere at the moment. I had someone provide it for me. Michael said it was a good show, never having played the game, and he enjoyed it. Even Greg said he enjoyed it. Guy said he liked the game, didn't understand the series. Well, the series is relatively straightforward, but that's okay. Each of their own. But I found that unlike, say, this is what made it my number one as opposed to, say, Andor, the action scenes in Halo were really good, really well done. And it was just wonderful to look at. You had different characters you could dial into. The violence it worked. And they actually showed not just the good guys, the Spartans, but the Covenant as well, and the motivations between the two. And you got the young girl, I don't know who her name is, who's a spy for one, going over to the other. I loved it. I thought it was really good. And that's we never talked about it. It just people just came and went. So
the good thing about Halo was there was a group of different protagonists, and all of them were served really well. There wasn't like one story that got forgotten. Each one of them had a driving story through the whole series, and they were all served pretty well.
And the Spartans look freaking grouse. You know, you've always wanted to see live action Master Chief instead of just, your costumers at bloody Pop Culture Expo, the real deal. And they looked awesome. You know, the big outfits and the mirrored sort of helmets and visors, and the Covenant were vicious. Oh, I thought, what's there not to like? So, love it. Greg has said Halo was on Paramount Plus, apparently. So, yes, go and check it out. I dialed into it. After the first episode, I thought, yep, I'm hooked. And it was great. So there you go. So now, is there anything you wanted to bring up before I move on to the last bit that I want to cover off?
No, I have a list of honorary mentions. I'm
Yep,
not
go
sure
for
if
it.
that's so. Some of the stuff I liked that didn't make it was the new Scream movie that was better than it should have been. Top Gun Maverick doesn't really go for the sci-fi thing, but it is one of those movies that was fantastic. Black Phone was an okay horror. Nope, we talked about. Bullet Train was a really good, quirky movie. I don't know if people saw that. Halloween Ends, everyone hated apart from me. I thought it was a good end to the current Halloween franchise. Barbarian, which was a horror movie that you would no way expect what was going to happen in that movie. If you like your sort of unusual, quirky horrors with a bit of grossness, that was a good one. Glass Onion, the Knives Out mystery, the sequel to Knives Out, was a worthy sequel. It probably wasn't as good as the original, but it was still a fantastic movie. It's on Netflix at the moment. And Peacemaker, the TV series, which I thought was a fantastic, quirky superhero TV series that deserves a mention as well. So they were my runners-up that didn't make the top 5.
Yeah, Peacemaker I did actually enjoy. I thought it was actually quite good with John Cena. One other series that I did enjoy that someone put me onto was Archive 81, about a dude who gets old videotapes and to restore them, and there's all sorts of mysterious supernatural shit going on there. Quite enjoyed it, actually, so it was very, very cool. Anything else you want to be on? I've got one last thing to cover off.
No.
All right, so the timing is rather interesting. Right now, we've discussed a whole lot of things for 2022, but there's one we haven't touched on at all. And it's what I was going to ask you when I show the picture is to say, well, how do we think this is going to go? You haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. There hasn't been enough time to see it. It only just came out like last week. And of course, it's Avatar, the sequel to Avatar from like 10 something years ago, 12 years ago. Right. The 3 hours and whatever minutes it happens to be, I know that you'll get to see it. I know I will. Definitely, it's like Avatar set the 3D world in like motion big time. And back in 2010, it was responsible for all these 3D TVs being produced. What are your thoughts on the fact that they've now released the sequel to Avatar, even though we haven't seen it yet, and chances are no one who's watching the show has seen it yet either? What are your thoughts?
Well, the success of the first Avatar, I thought, was a bit of an excuse me, a bit of an anomaly anyway, where I think it's a great science fiction movie. The fact that it was the biggest movie ever for so long, I couldn't quite see why it was. Maybe a mixture of the right time and 3D movies and the price of 3D movies being more. The fact that this has taken so long for a sequel to come out, that's the issue for me. Is it relevant? Do we need another one? I can't see it being that different from the original, apart from it's going to be set underwater because James Cameron loves doing stuff underwater. Do people want to go back to Na'vi for
Pandora
and see the Na'vi for 3.5 hours to see the same kind of thing again? I don't know. I want to see it because I love to see every sci-fi movie that comes out, but it isn't a movie that I had to see the day it came out either.
It's an interesting one. I agree with you. Can lightning strike twice? I mean, we haven't discussed it. Like even at the dinner the other night, no one brought it up, right? No one's discussed it here, and chances are it wouldn't have been brought up at all until I mentioned it. You do wonder. It could be one of the greatest comebacks in cinematic history. You know, being facetious, or it could just bomb in the ass. I don't know. And I agree with you. A lot of people saw the first movie and thought, well, why is this the biggest movie ever produced? It's not that good, even though visually it was stunning. The story was very ordinary. I don't know. It's a tricky one, isn't it? So I don't know if history can repeat itself, but I'm willing to be proven wrong.
I can tell you this. I saw the trailer for Avatar. I've seen it many times, but I saw it before Wakanda Forever, right? And a lot of that, because it's got Submariner in, is set underwater. And that movie wasn't as good because I had seen the trailer for Avatar before, which is amazing underwater vistas and crystal clear. And they didn't do it as good in Wakanda Forever. So seeing the Avatar scenes before it kind of cheapened the Marvel movie, which is stunning for a trailer to be able to do something like that. So it does look fantastic. It's whether people will buy into that 3.5 hours and going back to the planet and going through that experience again, or was it a one-off thing, a novelty when it first came out?
Don't know. Christy has said that didn't like the first one, won't be seeing this. I know William didn't like the original, so he won't be seeing this. I know a lot of people after seeing the first one thought, "What? Yeah, I agree." Like we said, what the hell was all the hype about? And it sort of got a bit antagonistic towards it. I don't know. Time will tell, but my internal gut feeling would be it's going to struggle, because otherwise people would have been raving about it by now. Oh my God, I can't wait to see it. I got my tickets. I'm ready to rock and roll. Nothing. No one said
Well,
that at all.
as you said earlier, a good yardstick to franchises is often what's selling in the shop. And I have never, ever had anyone come in and ask for Avatar merchandise. And I tell you what, you probably won't be seeing Avatar merchandise fly off the shelves. They've done Lego and stuff, which is always going to sell, but it's never going to be like a Star Wars section with a whole row of Avatar merchandise. And Avatar is, from a financial point of view, as big as Star Wars, so it should be able to support it, but it just doesn't.
It could come down to a timing thing. I think the first film came out in 2010. I could be wrong, right? Back then, X amount of movies had come out. This is what we had. Fast forward 12 years later, and of course, the world has changed significantly. We were talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe earlier, and all the stuff that's come out with that, and all the big franchises, your Star Treks and Star Wars and whatever else. So maybe it's the captive audience for Avatar isn't there like it once was. So, but we'll have to wait and see. I just wanted to bring it up because nobody else seems to be talking about it. So there you go. The Viola said, happy birthday to you, Mr. Aron. And with that in mind, kids, just for those who are probably already aware of this, but for those who aren't, if you haven't had a chance, be sure to check out the old Sci-Fi Zone socials on Instagram and Twitter and all that. Find out what other shows are coming up, including the one in 2 days' time, which is particularly cool. And don't forget, it is Christmas week. So if you get a chance, you got to pop your nose down to good old Aron's Collectibles, especially on Christmas Eve when I'll be there by the last minute. Avatar collectible. I don't think there's anything in the store at the moment, but hey, you never know. Just get an action figure of some kind, spray paint it blue, put a tail on it, bang, there's your Na'vi.
We don't have a Na'vi, but we can sell you a Smurf. There
you go. The second smallest Na'vi in the entire universe. Absolutely fantastic. So there you go. There's our wrap up for 2022. What do you reckon, Mr. Aron?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. I'm definitely looking forward to some of the movies that are coming out next year, probably more than the slate of movies that came out this year, actually.
Yes, in the grand scheme of things, it was a little bit hit and miss. But there was, in the end, something for everyone, depending on what it is that you like. So there you go. Anyway, that's it for us. We're done. D&A reviewed all out for the entire 2022. We're finished. Pack up and go home. Don't forget 2 days' time. The last episode of Rip It Off the Card, the Christmas special coming out. And that should be very, very good. So be sure to check it out. Any final words before we go, Mr. Aron?
No, I think we've covered it all. I think people are sick of us waffling on.
Waffling is what we do. Absolutely fantastic. Party hard, rock on. And we'll see you all around the traps. Okay, then. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.
Have a good night, guys.